So I thought I was done with unofficial games, but y'all had other ideas. There are way more awesome fan projects that I've never heard of, and the comments in the last video really let me know about them. Sure, some groups of fans were a bit more hostile than preferable, but the recommendations were welcome nonetheless. So I've been digging through all of these awesome recommendations, and I found some really great gems. But if you haven't seen the first video, let me just catch you up real quick here. I'm talking about fan-made games and overhauls of existing games, but I'm avoiding saying certain words that the powers that be don't really like when they're used, so I'm just going to be lumping all of these together as fan projects. But if that's not accurate enough for you, I'll make sure to label each one with a more accurate descriptor on screen. These fan projects can be all sorts of things, but I'm going to be focusing on the ones that take existing games or series and completely reinvent them. These are always massive labors of love, but you know, the creators usually don't make a dime off them, so let's be cool, alright? You know, no snitches. Also, I usually like to link to the games that I talk about, but that's not happening for this video or this series really, because, you know, obvious reasons. So the drill is just search it and click at your own risk, you know? Just be careful about where you try to find not legit downloads, you know? Alright, now that that's all out of the way, let's get right into them. Castlevania The Holy Relics is a 2017 fan project from the creator of the awesome Metroid Rogue Dawn that I talked about in my last video. It's a completely new, awesome, polished Castlevania game. The structure here though takes a page out of the Mega Man book, because you can play any of the first 5 stages in any order that you want, each ending with you gaining a new relic that allows you to do new abilities for the rest of your playthrough. And then only after you beat those 5 stages, you take on the final stage. So, you know, kinda Mega Man. To add another layer on top of this, I played through the improved control version of this that gives you a bit more air control than the typical standard NES Castlevania, you know, jump and commit kind of gameplay. So with that tweak on top of this already awesome new game, it can really be put up there next to Castlevania 3 as one of, if not the best Castlevania on the NES. So if you want a challenging but fair game that refines the classic Castlevania formula, this one's worth taking a look at. Zelda Escape from the Facility is a nice little hour-long game that's kind of like a one-shot dungeon that you might find in a bigger Zelda game. It was created for a Zelda escape room competition, and the first thing that probably stuck out to you about this is its industrial steampunk look that redresses the whole world and even Link himself. You'll be solving puzzles to gain access to new areas, but since you start empty-handed, instead of the prevalence of keys, you'll be finding more items than the typical Zelda dungeon. And those are what restrict the access from different sections of the dungeon, which make it kind of feel a lot more Metroidvania-y than the normal Zelda dungeon. There are even some new items that are made specifically for this, and it's a nice short game that if you want a quick hit of a Zelda dungeon with the exploration and stuff you'd expect, this really could just hit the spot in an hour or less. Celeste Mario's Zap and Dash mixes Celeste's platforming and dashing with Super Mario Bros. It's the kind of fan project that is a honestly technical miracle, and it's super cool to see it pulled off on the NES within Super Mario Bros. Of all things. You can wall jump, air dash, and do even more Celeste-style mechanics that I don't really want to spoil here. But on top of the amazing feat of the gameplay, the graphics here are really gorgeous, and they use the NES color palette masterfully. The structure here even calls back to Mario Odyssey, where you collect moons that are all over the world, and for me to be even being able to say that means there is a whole environment that you can explore. So instead of the linear level-based structure of Super Mario Bros., there's actually an interconnected map that you can poke around in. It is a precision platformer, so it is tough and requires some skill and patience, but it's got a really generous checkpoint system, and even when you're like stuck and struggling in a trial and error state, it's still really fun to play, and that's like an amazing game design feat, is to make sure the game feels good even when the player is failing. Simply put, this is a must-play for Mario fans, Celeste fans, or anyone who loves a great precision platformer. Smash Remix is one of the most impressive fan projects out there. It's an incredible community-made version of Super Smash Bros. For the Nintendo 64 that adds a ton of new characters, stages, and bosses. It's still the same classic Smash 64 at its core, but with a ton of stuff that just builds on top. Most of the new stuff here even being era-appropriate to the N64, like the addition of Conqueror, Goemon, and even Marina from Mischief Makers, which is really cool to see some love for characters that never made it into Smash proper. Plus, there are a bunch of stages and characters that were backported from later Smash games, like DDD or Mewtwo. Then in addition to that stuff, there's new stages and new bosses too. If you grew up with the N64 and love classic Smash, this is right up your alley. To keep it in the realm of Nintendo crossover party games, next up is Super Mario Kart Horizons, a fan project that upgrades Super Mario Kart for the SNES. Just like Smash Remix, this is still the same kart racer at its core, but with some really good tweaks that make it a bit more palatable to modern players. There's a ton of new tracks and themes that make it a bit more interesting as well, because honestly, as someone who didn't really grow up playing the vanilla SNES Mario Kart, it kind of has always felt pretty dull to me. I know that might be sacrilege, but you know, it didn't really hit its stride till it entered 3D. But here, the mechanics are tweaked to feel a lot smoother and less archaic, but the major upgrade here is the visuals. All of the sprites have been redrawn, and it just reads better to me as a 3D environment to drive around than the original. So if you want a new Super Nintendo Mario Kart game with a really nice facelift to it, check this one out. Dr. Robotniks Ring Racers is a fan-made kart racer built on top of Sonic Roboblast 2, which is another fan project for another time, but it has a very dedicated following for some really good reasons. It's a sprite-based kart racer that feels like a kind of Dream Saturn or Dreamcast era Mario Kart clone with Sonic, but it's got way more under the hood than that description might make it seem. It is totally packed tight with tons of unique mechanics, like the whole titular ring racing system where you collect rings to burn rings to keep your momentum going around sharp turns and up hills. But if you're like me, a newbie who's just getting your feet wet with this one, that stuff might seem a little bit intimidating, so there is luckily an accessibility feature that handles all that stuff for you, so you just can kind of play it like a normal kart racer. There's like tons of tracks and characters to unlock, and even more if you want to go down the modding rabbit hole for this one, but at that point you're so far down the mod hole, I don't even know, man. That said, there's way more than enough stuff in the base release itself, and it's just really incredibly impressive to see how much stuff they packed in here. As someone who just has barely scratched the surface here by just kind of checking this out for a few hours, I am blown away with this game. I didn't even touch the online scene with this game because I could imagine it being pretty hardcore and I didn't want to get blown out, so I just checked out the AI, and I really liked how the AI didn't have any rubber banding to it, so that's really nice. But it's also got a split-screen multiplayer option, so it could be a perfect game for a casual couch gaming session with some friends. So if you're like most people who've raced the same Mario Kart 8 tracks for years, you really should check out what these dedicated Sonic fans have cooked up. It might even raise your expectations on what you want to see out of Nintendo. Alright, and then another Sonic fan project here, and that is Sonic Triple Trouble 16-bit, and it's a game that I thought was just a simple port of the Game Gear game by the same name, but I could not have been more wrong. Sure, that is the base concept of what it is, but it might just be the best 2D Sonic game out there right next to Sonic Mania. This is a ground-up reimagining of Triple Trouble built in Game Maker with new features and new characters. The feel of a Sonic game is really the make-or-break thing that any fan could tell you, but this nails it and maybe even improves on it. The speed and ability to anticipate what's coming up is really nailed here. It feels like everything is placed in the level perfectly for you to be able to clock it coming up and act accordingly. Basically, if you're one of the many Sonic fans who is constantly begging for Sonic Mania 2 and haven't played this yet, you really should. Then we have Mega Man Rock and Roll, and it is a 2019 fan project that gives Roll her time to shine as the hero. As the story goes, Mega Man is captured and Roll has to become the new super fighting robot to rescue him. This is another fan project that just nails the feel of the series while making a bunch of tweaks along the way while building on what has come before. It's a whole new game with new robot masters, new levels, and new abilities. If Capcom kept releasing retro throwback style Mega Man games in the style of 9 and 10, I could see this fitting right in line there. So this is just like for Sonic fans wanting Mania 2, if you're begging for Mega Man 12 and you haven't played this, you're really doing yourself a disservice. TMNT Rescue-Palooza is a fan project made in open bore that's a massive love letter to the classic Ninja Turtles beat-em-ups. It's got 60 playable characters, yeah, 60, so Genghis Frog fans, you're not left out here. 17 stages calling back to the classic games, and even has 4-player local co-op, as any good Ninja Turtles game should. The graphics here are a mix of the different retro eras of the series that was when the series was blowing up, and there's a ton of love for the series packed in here with tons of Easter eggs. I'd say if it wasn't for Shredder's Revenge coming out recently, this really would be the definitive Turtles game. The first Rayman game gives me a ton of nostalgia. After the NES, my next console was the PS1, and Rayman was my first game for it. That said, it's pretty notorious nowadays for its difficulty, so it's no wonder why I never really got past the first few levels as a kid. But now there's Rayman Redemption, a fan-made reimagining that has a ton of new content, tweaks, and makes it not so punishing. It's built from the ground up in Game Maker, but keeps the really awesome sprite art from the original, and it just is simply the new definitive way to play this game if you're gonna come to it nowadays. Plus, there's a whole level editor, so you can get your Mario Maker on making Rayman levels now. If you're one of the dozen Rayman fans that love the original more than the 3D entries in the series, like myself, this one is something special. Alright, and that was my second video on fan projects. I really appreciate all the comments, and really that last video blew up way more than I ever expected it to, so welcome to all of the new people. But yeah, if you have any suggestions for fan projects, you know what I mean, leave them in the comments. I really appreciate all of the recommendations. I wouldn't have seen most of these games if any of them. If you like the video, do all the YouTube-y stuff, share it around. It really actually is super helpful when you like share it with a friend or share it on a Discord, or you know, that'd be really awesome if you enjoyed this video. And let me know if you check these games out and enjoy them. Yeah, anyway, thank you for watching. Thank you for watching. Thank you for watching. Thank you for watching. Thank you for watching.